Hello, this is DIY Reptiles, and today I'm going to be setting up a simple and easy 12x12x18 ExoTerra tank for juvenile crested geckos. I'm starting off with the soil. I am rehydrating a dehydrated compressed brick of cocoa fiber because that is kind of what I like to use as the base of my substrate, and they're these really cool like bricks you can get of them, and then you just spray them with water and they rehydrate themselves and they're nice humid substrate to use. And then once it was rehydrated and I kind of mixed it up, I added in some peat moss, which is super dry, but as it gets more wet, it's not so dusty. But since this is an enclosure in which it'll always stay wet, I'm not really concerned about the dust. Then I added in some sphagnum moss to get wet as well, and I made the whole thing more wet after that. Then with the enclosure, I need to use a drainage layer because if you don't, then the soil will sit in the bottom and get stagnant. So I added in these clay balls, which you can get in bags at hardware stores like Lowe's, I believe, or you can order them online. Most of the things I've ordered online through Amazon. And I just spread these about on the bottom, and they will absorb water, but also water will sit in between the cracks with them, and this prevents the water from stagnating in the substrate. Then I added a layer of landscaping mesh to fit the bottom, and then I started adding the base soil. I have this small tree and English ivy that I want to use, but it's planted in with these cactuses. So what I decided to do was that I was going to take it out to plant into the new terrarium, and then I was going to plant this larger cactus that I have with the little cactuses in this like glass bowl thing that I have kind of set up as like a little terrarium. And once I was done with that, I took the leftover soil and I added it to the rest of the soil I had to use. And then I also had this mango tree that I wanted to use in the tank because I thought it would do well in the very humid environment with the geckos. So I decided that I would depot it and throw the soil into the rest of the soil as well because it's just older versions of the same soil mix. And then once I had everything ready, I put the plants onto that base level of soil and I started to do a bunch of hardscape, mostly like twigs and small stuff because these are small geckos and it's not very difficult to have something support them. And then I added in lots more soil and botanicals and leaves and leaf litter and everything. For the lid of the tank, I decided that I wanted to make sure it was as humid as possible, so I covered it in saran wrap and then I used a bit of painter's tape to keep it on. And I don't completely recommend this because it'll become too like stagnant inside, but I do recommend covering one half of the top. So then leaving the other half to allow for airflow, covering one half, and this is what I do with the 3 ExoTerra tanks that I have. The other 2 are 18x18x24s, and I do the same thing, and it seems to work pretty well with tropical boreal geckos that need to stay humid but not with stagnant air. Once everything was set up, I sprayed it all down really well to make sure everything was really hydrated, all of the soil very hydrated, and the botanicals and the plants and everything. And then I finished up with a few final touches. I'm now going to add in Christopher and Finnick into this tank. So it's interesting to see how everybody does in here, but it seems like it's very humid in here, which is good. So here we have Finnick. And Christopher. Get him. There we go. I love that. I feel like the trees make it have a very strange proportion which I'm not used to seeing with my animals because I usually use big-leaved plants. So the fact that there's like this thing and the mango tree that you don't really see the leaves a whole lot, but it's very cluttered and green, yet it's not like big leaves. It kind of makes it, I don't know, it just gives it a very strange proportion, makes them look bigger or something. I'm not entirely sure. It's very different than anything else I've done, and I'm not used to using ExoTerra tanks. I'm used to just using fish tanks, so this will be really nice. And that's going to be the rest of this build. It's really that simple, and many months later I still have this tank set up. When all of that was filmed and when I'm editing this is like drastically different time period. It's still set up. The geckos have completely outgrown it, as they should. Crested geckos are not meant to be in a 12x12x18 for their entire life. Those were just small juveniles, and they shouldn't be kept in what is essentially a 10-gallon. They were moved up to larger tanks. But the tank's doing well. The plants did not do perfectly in this humid environment as I had hoped, but now I have it filled with pothos and some nerve leaf plants, and the mango tree's still in there, but it's not doing great. And then I have a arrowhead vine in there as well. I've actually switched up the build a couple of times throughout the life of it, but it essentially stayed the same. I just moved the soil around and planted different plants and added a different hardscape. But from the front here, it looks very similar. And the nice thing about it was that there's a nice area for a deli cup to fit, which was the same case in when it was set up a little bit differently. And that's nice because with the mini crested geckos I end up raising in this, they would always have roaches to be able to eat, and now I'm raising up a different species of gecko that's very similar. So the original setup of this build was in March. It's currently January of the next year. This is because I've basically been filming for a year and I have not edited any of it. So now I'm editing it, and it's still kind of relevant because it's still stuff that I did that doesn't really matter when it comes out. But that is why I now have a gargoyle gecko in here, because currently I have a gargoyle gecko, but back then I had only just started breeding crested geckos, and now I'm trying to start breeding gargoyle geckos. So up there is John, and he'll have a video out in the far future, and I get to editing that. But he does just as well in this enclosure, and he's kind of the biggest gecko that I'd want to be in this enclosure. But eventually maybe I'll use this tank for morning geckos even, because I have those now too. So there's lots of things going on that is not made aware of on the channel because I'm posting really late stuff. But this tank will stay with me, I think, and I will continue figuring out uses for it, because since I've had John in here, I haven't been able to move up more crested geckos into it, so they are just in tubs with perfectly adequate husbandry and everything. I breed crested geckos just to then sell them, so they're only ever temporarily in my care anyway until they go to their final homes. That is basically it for this video, so I hope you enjoyed. If you did, like it down below. If you have any comments or concerns, comments below. And if you want more content, then subscribe. Have a great day.